Clovis, California is one of the top rated areas to live in all of California, but it's not for everyone. In order to fully mentally prepare for living in Clovis, California, it's important to think about some of the things that might not be ideal. So in an effort to be open and honest about what it's like living in Clovis, let's explore the biggest negative about living in Clovis, California. Let's jump right into it. The summers in the Central Valley are really long and they're really hot. From May all the way to September, we can see temperatures in the upper 90s and even the low 100s. There might be a week or two where we touch 110 degrees in the summer. Yeah, it's really hot. This can actually have a pretty decent health effect on people, as heat stroke and heat exhaustion are a major concern throughout the summer. Learning to deal with these temperatures can take a little bit of time, and truthfully, you never really get fully used to the summers. Every year I say, triple digits can't be that bad, right? We did it last year, it couldn't have been that bad. And then we touch the 90s and it feels like I can smell my skin sizzling in the Central Valley sun. There are some ways to adjust to this and handle the summer heat in the Central Valley, which I'll explore later in the video, but in this first section I want to emphasize just how hot it actually is. I spent 4 summers working at Wildwater Adventure, which is one of the local water parks in Clovis. Every single day we had to deal with people going through heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Things as simple as I didn't eat my breakfast, or I haven't drank any water today, or silly things like the only thing I've drank today is 4 Red Bulls. As long as you're drinking water, you're not out in the sun for a prolonged period, make sure you put on sunscreen because you don't want that leathery skin. As long as you're taking care of yourselves, the summer heat isn't that bad. Now, one of the major draws to Clovis is their bike paths and recreation areas like parks, but being outside in the summer for a prolonged period could be a danger. A common trend in the summer in Clovis is getting outside of your house so that you don't have to run your own air conditioning, because that can get expensive. Don't worry, we'll talk about that. Some common places people go during the heat are movies, but movies can be expensive as well. When you factor in the cost of admission, and then you go get popcorn and a candy and a drink, you can end up spending $30 to $50 easily on a trip to the movies. You know, which isn't a bad thing once in a while, but if you're going out every single day in order to beat the heat, can add up. You can always go to Sierra Vista Mall, hang out in there, enjoy their air conditioning, but again, malls are a dangerous place. If you can walk out of a mall without buying something, you've got more willpower than me. Although Sierra Vista Mall has changed quite a bit, so unless you're in the business for a katana or some Native American artwork, then you might be okay. As I mentioned earlier, there's also a water park, which is called Wildwater Adventure. It's out in the Clovis countryside, and is open seasonally from the end of May to the beginning of September, which just so happens to coincide with the hottest part of the year. Tickets to the water park, again, going to be around $30 to $50 depending on the time of year that you get them. They also offer season passes, which is a good opportunity for locals to save a little bit of money on those frequent trips, but even those are around $90 this season. But don't forget another perk of Clovis. You're right in the middle of California, which gives you easy access to a lot of the cooler areas in the state. Places like San Francisco, especially Monterey Bay. It's always really cool and cloudy. I know this last year they had some weather that was a little bit hotter, but warmer weather in Monterey is still like 80 degrees, so let's not get crazy here. You can even take a 5-hour trip down to San Diego on a whim. I always laugh at the fact that one of the major selling points of Clovis is that you can drive anywhere else. But hey, when life gives you lemons, squeeze them. Now I know what you're thinking. If people are going outside of their house to beat the heat, and they're spending this much money just on going to the movies or going to a water park, why not just stay home and run the air conditioning? So let's talk about the cost of running the air conditioning in Clovis, California. At the end of the day, it's going to depend on how energy efficient your home is. We're starting to see solar panels become more and more common on these newer developments. But just because your home has solar panels doesn't mean you're not spending any money on energy. Depending on if those solar panels are leased, a power purchase agreement, or fully owned, you might have a small energy bill, but there also might be a monthly fee associated with having those solar panels on your house. You can probably expect between $400 on the incredibly low end, and more likely closer to the $800 mark. I'm sure that there are some situations where you can get lower or higher than that. $800 on energy isn't something to scoff about. That's something that most people will have to factor into their budget. Not only is this heat overwhelming physically, but it can also get pretty expensive over time. Who knew that there were so many variables when it comes to having solar on your property? That's exactly why it's important to reach out to us early. Give me a call or a text and we can talk about exactly what the move would look like for you and help you prepare as best as possible. In the summer, my mom loves to micromanage her air conditioning. Like if you're not in the house, the AC's off. If she's out working in the yard, no air conditioning. The only time she turns on her air conditioning is if she knows she's going to have guests over, and as soon as they leave, that thing goes off. Even with micromanaging that air conditioning, she's still paying probably above $300. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do to save a buck here. Now, in my experience, the temperature alone isn't the only factor when it comes to heat. The Central Valley is in the desert, and what we have is known as a dry heat. Compared to other areas back east or in the Midwest, those areas might be a little more humid than you'd find in Clovis, California. Even within California, where you're looking at areas like San Francisco or Monterey, Santa Cruz, because the temperatures there are so low, a lot of the units don't even have air conditioning because there's no need for it year-round. But I've spent some time in those areas when the temperature is 80 degrees, and I've also spent some time back east in North Carolina and Iowa when there's 80% or 100% humidity. Honestly, I'd say those are more miserable than being in the valley at 100 degrees. That might be a hot take, pun intended, but the truth is, no matter where you are, there's going to be some seasons where you're warmer than the others. Honestly, I'd rather be in this dry heat instead of back east where you're getting soaked as soon as you walk out the door. This feels more like being in an oven instead of being in a sauna. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, one of the major draws of Clovis is the recreation. There are many parks, bike paths, hiking opportunities, but it gets so hot that it can be miserable to even step foot outside. It's a real shame when a big reason that people might move here could be inaccessible for over half the year. It doesn't mean that you can't do those things, but like I mentioned earlier, you want to be safe about how you do it. Hydrate, stay covered, put on sunscreen, don't expose yourself for extended periods of time, always take a buddy with you. Compared to some of the other areas of the world where you can just go anywhere at any time, there needs to be a little more preparation and planning when you explore these outdoor activities in Clovis during the summer. I played baseball for 17 years, and a lot of the times played in summer leagues. Being out on the field when it's 110 degrees out, not fun. I remember there being days when it was so hot that it was difficult to breathe. Like the air was just thick. You could see all the heat waves and, oh, you gotta do what you gotta do. Every year, I think I've gotten used to the heat and then the 90-degree weather hits. It's only uphill from there. Truthfully, it's like starting fresh every year, but at least I know exactly how to prepare for the heat. Depending on when you move here, it can be pretty jarring. If you move in the winter where you get that nice gradual change, you can experience those 70s and then the 80s, and then that high ramp up from the 90s to the 100s. At least you have some time to adjust and prepare. I've had friends who've moved here in June and July, and they've gotten almost literally thrown into the fire. I can see those people immediately regretting their decision and considering relocating immediately. But give yourself some time to adjust, and experiencing the full year where you get to see the benefits of the winter and then the gradual change into summer, at least you get to see that there are ways to cope with it. You might not get used to it, but you can at least find some ways to deal with it. Which brings me to the winter. And this is the huge trade-off for having such a harsh summer. Our winters are very mild. Our temperatures barely get below freezing. A high on a winter day is probably between 50 and 60 degrees. Of course, you might have those outliers where you hit 49, but for the most part, it's very, very mild. Sweater weather, but rarely jacket weather. Which is a shame because I have a closet full of jackets that I never get to wear, but I guess that's the trade-off from living here in Clovis. In terms of seasons, you get really harsh summer and then pretty mild winter. A little bit of rain in there, but truthfully, the extreme weather is really only in the summer. So if you can tolerate that for half the year, you're going to be golden for the rest. If at this point in the video you haven't ran off because of how hot the summers are here, then hey, maybe give Clovis a chance. If you're moving to Clovis and you want to know more about what you can expect, give this playlist here a watch and you might learn a thing or two.